Sippers, welcome to this episode of the Tea With Me podcast with me, Shane Todd. It's a guest episode. It's an interview episode. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. I'm speaking with Peter Caldwell, who's the author of The Secret Life of Special Advisors. I don't know a lot about special advisors in politics other than they seem a little bit crafty. They seem to move in the shadows and they seem to be like those ghosts in Harry Potter. They kind of just run about, but you don't actually see their feet moving. So obviously with like RHI, the DUP, special advisors have become way more in the news than they used to be. They were just never talked about in politics, and now they're as famous as the politicians, like my man Dominic Cummings, who just needed to test those eyes out. Peter, who we speak to here, is from Northern Ireland, has had access to Dominic Cummings and people like Alistair Campbell as well, who worked with Tony Blair. If you're not into politics, which, by the way, I am not in any way, I think you'll still find this a really interesting episode. Peter's just a guy from Northern Ireland who was right in at like Westminster and Whitewell, where all the big British government stuff happens. And, I'm not into politics because I said British government stuff. I don't even know what that means. Peter's book came out in October. It's been serialized in loads and loads of newspapers. Peter was a special advisor to 4 cabinet ministers and miners. And what are cabinet miners? I don't know, but he served with them. He was a media advisor, a political fixer, a troubleshooter, and according to the bio of his book as well, occasional wardrobe consultant. We have a really, really honest and open interview. Peter has worked for the Tory government for a long time, so I asked him about their handling of the Marcus Rashford school meals for kids, free meals thing, and he was just really open and honest about it, and didn't kind of shy away from the question. I've known Peter for years, kind of vaguely, so it was great to sit down for this chat. I hope you enjoy it. Before we launch into it, let me plug 2 things. Number 1 is manscaped.com. Manscaped is an electric razor for not your overcarriage, like your face, let's just say the undercarriage. Manscaped is the number 1 product in men's grooming. The Lawnmower 3.0 is a little electric razor that, let's just say, takes you from Hagrid to Harry Potter. Because Harry Potter wasn't running about trying to fight Voldemort and the boys with stubble. That he was running about being that fresh-faced wizard boy that he was, and that's exactly what your undercarriage can look like, a fresh-faced wizard boy. Now, is that not a ringing endorsement for this product? I use it, producer Dan uses it. I don't know if Peter Caldwell uses it. I don't know, but he might send me his book. I might send him a Lawnmower 3.0. If you go on manscaped.com, especially in the run-up to Christmas, you like the look of their men's grooming products, even for you or for somebody else maybe it'd be a weird gift to get your dad, but I like it. I think it's fun. There's a discount code TEAWITHME for 20% off and free shipping. Manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping. Also, we got to plug the Patreon. So a couple of days ago, we put up the Patreon episode. That goes out to the Patreons live. So they all join in on Zoom. They ask questions. We have a bit of a party. And then down the line, we put it out as a public episode. We're doing another live episode this Sunday with Owen Colgan from the Hardy Bucks. So Owen's based in Dublin, based down south. I had him on the podcast near the start of the lockdown. He was brilliant. You'll know him from his online sketches from the Hardy Bucks. Just a very genuine guy and a hilarious fella as well. So he's going to come on. I'll get a stand-up comedian on as well, and another stand-up on. And as always, we get the sippers to ask questions when they're live on Zoom. Last one was class. You can watch that now on YouTube and other podcasting platforms as well. So if you want to join the Patreon, you will get to see that episode live. Patreon.com/teawithmepodcast. Let's get into this episode with Peter Caldwell. I really enjoyed doing this. I didn't know a lot about special advisors and politics before this. He kind of filled me in. I've got a better understanding, and I also get the idea that there's a very entertaining book to read. So obviously you can get Peter's book, Amazon, all good bookstores. I think that's what you're supposed to say. Sippers, enjoy the episode. Cheers. Peter, first things first, do you drink tea?
I do drink tea, but today I've got some Ponzi water. So there's some Ponzi water.
Oh, wow.
So despite the fact this comes out of a tap, I've imported this from Fiji.
I mean, I'd never seen the sports cap top one before. Do you notice a difference in taste in like Fiji water to the likes of your Ballygowan, the likes of your River Rock? You know, you're living in London now. Do you feel that you have to shun these brands and drink something more trendy?
I mean, it actually says on it, artisanal water.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what artisan nature bottling water involves, but I mean, this is a step up from River Rock. You know, Fiji doesn't need to sponsor a marathon, Shane.
No, it doesn't. But the thing is, with yes, that comes from Fiji. It comes from like water springs and stuff. Deep River Rock comes from the likes of Belfast Loch. It comes from Loch Ness, and I don't know what's in it, but I think you living in London, I think what you should do is still represent where you're from and not be afraid to go in with a litre and a half Ballygowan. That's the thing as well. Our waters are always far too big. So do you drink, would you say on average you would drink less than 10 cups a week, more?
Tea? Yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, probably 10 or so. Yeah, something around that. I'm bigger Earl Grey person as well. So like my political hero, Theresa May, she's a big Earl Grey person, as am I. So
I mean, we'll definitely get on to that. I'd love to chat to you about Theresa May. We will do that. But first things first, I imagine in the political world, in Whitewell, in political circles, I would say that I very nearly called it White Rock there as well, and I don't know what politics happens out of White Rock.
Either one.
I would say it doesn't directly affect the British government. Would Earl Grey be seen? Would you almost be like a bit of an outsider drinking Earl Grey? Because I would say in the fast moving political world, it's coffee. I would say coffee is the top dog there, surely.
Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to give you an insight into my character. Hold on a second.
Wow, I have no idea what's going to happen here.
So this is even Ponce. You thought the Fiji water was Ponce.
I did.
I'm now going to show you the Fortnum and Mason tea. It's quite literally the Queen's grocer where I get my tea. So
I mean,
£4.95 for 20 tea bags.
Right, I don't respect Earl Grey, and no one really does in the podcast, but I think when you go to that level, that has to be commended and it has to be respected, and that's even an Earl Grey I would try, perhaps.
I live to give.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's a bio right there, Peter. I've known you for I interviewed you for, I don't know if you remember this, for what was a BBC training day. So what?
Yes.
Right, so this thing was called Scuzzy, and I was told it's a pilot for like a young person's type chat show. I turned down something really cool to do it because I thought that this was like they were really thinking about making this a TV show, and I was supposed to be on like, weirdly, this is linked to politics too. It was like the European Union, Northern Ireland sent young people to the European Union for this like conference, and you got the report from it. And I had no interest in politics, but I was studying journalism at the time. And then I heard about this program Scuzzy, and I thought this is nailed on for a commission. But it turned out it was just BBC's way of like training camera people on like like an as live show. You were one of the guests. It was potentially like I must have been about 19 or 20 when I did the show. You're older than me, but what's weird is you look younger now than you did then. So what have you been doing?
Secret weapon, custard creams. If you've got a bit of fat around your face, around the eyes especially, you do tend to look younger. So I am the Dorian Gray of the biscuit world.
I thought you were talking about like opening the custard cream and then that stuff in that the cream inside. I thought you were going to say that's what you've been putting on. But yeah, that is weird. You do genuinely look younger. You've got a fresh haircut. It's good to see. It's good to see that you're doing well. I think
looking younger than at that time was probably in some way linked to the fact that at the time you interviewed me, I was working for Stephen Nolan, which essentially adds years to anyone's life.
What was your role in the Nolan? Were you a reporter for the show?
Yeah. Although, I mean, ask yourself this: if you're the reporter on the Nolan show? Your job is essentially to take airtime away from Stephen Nolan. Right. So that's fairly tricky.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So you never really get to cover. You never get to cover. I mean, if you were working in that role now, your job would just be running after people in petrol station forecourts.
You got to dream the dream. The best one ever on Nolan was what would happen is they'd say, you're doing this interview at 9:30, and then he would just keep talking. So I was standing in a freezing car park in Knocknagonie, actually about to interview Santa Claus, who was, I think there was something about like a noise dispute, classic Nolan. There was a noise dispute about Santa's grotto making like too much noise, and then the neighbors were really annoyed. And then I was interviewing this guy who was Santa, and basically there are 3 reasons at the BBC that you can be, actually you should keep this under consideration, that you can be instantly dismissed. One is, let's just say, doing something with another person on the premises that you shouldn't be doing. I'll leave that to your imagination. The second is not having a TV license. And the third is denying the existence of Santa Claus live on air. So I was absolutely terrified I would say the wrong thing. Then it was meant to be at 9:30, and literally Stephen Nolan kept talking for an hour. And at 27 minutes past 10, I mean, I was standing in the cold, in the snow for an hour with this guy who's like basically some sort of world's strongest man type guy dressed up as Santa Claus.
Was it Glenn Ross?
Yeah, it was Glenn Ross. It was Glenn Ross. Yes.
That's the story.
And I thought, every time I'm like, oh, well, we'll come to this in a minute, Glenn. We'll come to this in a minute. No, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Literally for an hour, I kind of strung him along. 27 minutes past 10, I finally get to interview him about this noise dispute. He talks, he gives like one answer, 2 answers, and then you're into Jerry Anderson, basically. And I just thought, Glenn Ross is going to lamp me. He is a lot more,
that's not
tougher
ideal.
than me.
That's not ideal. Of all the people to keep waiting in a cold car park, Glenn Ross would not be high on my list, because Glenn Ross is like, I don't know if he's the world's strongest man, or he is a strong man. And I think
he quite literally was the world's strongest man. He held the title for a while, definitely.
I know somebody used to live behind him in Bangor and said he used to, on Sunday afternoons, just like this, I'm not making this up, he used to just like carry a bath around his garden. I don't know why that's always stuck in my head, and I think every Sunday I think about, I wonder if Glenn Ross just running about his
carrying a bath.
Yeah, what a guy. I mean, see, like you say, that story of, like a noise dispute at a Santa's grotto in Tesco, Knocknagonie, or wherever it was. Like, you don't hear that sort of stuff on radio anymore. Radio has become, when I listen to local radio, it's so hard hitting now. Is there a reason for that? I mean, is there my idea of news, and even like the news you'd say at 6 o'clock and stuff, is that there always used to be the and finally stories. There was always, I talked to David Blevins, who you know about this. Like,
yeah,
where are those light stories? What is the reason for not giving us those stories anymore?
Well, this is why we need you, Shane. This is why we need you and your fellow comedians.
Yep.
Because life has got a lot more serious in the last few years. People are just, in general, people are just a bit more serious. And, there's Brexit, there's coronavirus, there's all these things that are kind of worrying us. And what we need is a good laugh. Basically, we just need to take life a little bit less seriously. But that's very difficult when you're dealing with all these very, very serious things that people are thinking about. So, on a serious point, I think the news should be more lighthearted. I think the news show I would suggest people listen to is Jeremy Vine on Radio 2. It is full of people who know the news, are interested in it. Or definitely, I was a journalist for 10 years, are interested in the news, know the news. But like, there was a debate about this statue of a feminist, very famous feminist from the 18th century called Mary Wollstonecraft. And it's like this naked statue. And it's really all these people going, this is dreadful. This is very sexist. And, she was this pioneering woman. Why is there a naked statue of this woman? And my mate on the Jeremy Vine show is reporting from like live from the statue. And basically he said, some people have called it pert. And Jeremy Vine was like, what do you think? Is it pert? And then there was a dog going mad in the background. And he's like, I would give you my opinion, but I might be about to be mauled by a spaniel. So, that is good radio. I was actually on the Jeremy Vine show the other day with a soap writer. and they said, all this stuff that's been going on in recent days about, Downing Street and all these people resigning and the Prime Minister's fiancée and whatever. And I said, basically it's a version of the Pat, Frank, Peggy love triangle. And essentially the Prime Minister's fiancée, who's actually, a very accomplished woman, former special advisor, former director of communications for the Conservative Party. She's not just, his fiancée, was the Peggy Mitchell of the situation, who said, get out of my Downing Street.
Yeah. Basically. I mean, Frank Butcher, what a guy. Frank was a man in demand around the cobblestone. Oh, is he Standish the cobblestones? No, it's Coronation Street.
Coronation Street is the cobbles, yeah. No, Albert Square, yeah.
Albert Square, yeah. Everybody wanted a piece of Frank. He was just Frank was always sunburnt, wearing a lot of bling. Like, I definitely don't blame anyone for who did he pick? Did he pick Peggy in the end?
I genuinely can't remember. But Pat was there going, "You've made your choice, Frank. You've made your choice."
The big earrings.
Yeah, the big earrings. Yeah, I actually picked up. Do you know what? I live in Hammersmith. And there's a book exchange thing. London people love their old book exchange things. You finish a book, you leave it down, someone picks it up. It's so kind of earthy and
would
cool.
Never work in Belfast.
No, that would be gone in 60 seconds. But I actually picked up. I had a philosophy book and sort of laid it down, so someone can get those great lines. And I picked up what I think was probably a very worthwhile exchange, which was the actress who plays Pat Butcher, Pamson Clement, her autobiography, which was called The End of an Earring.
I mean, it undermined anything she's going to say in the book.
Because people are going to take it so seriously in the first place, obviously.
Yeah. So, Peter, let me kind of obviously I want to talk about the book, but let me find out about kind of briefly your background and how you got into journalism and then how you became a special advisor, which will then link us onto the book. So, working on the Nolan show, being a journalist there, you went to London from what I remember, you went to London shortly after that, is that right?
Yeah, so I kind of had this, I was sort of one of those children. I was one of those really annoying kind of kids who watched the news, had opinions. Those people you see on those kind of programs like Spotlight Special, those kind of 16-year-olds, you're like, well, I actually think that, the government should do that. And you're like, you genuinely you just have no idea. I was one of those kids, basically. And I now hate those kids. I hate them. But I was very much one of them. So, thought I was, Jimmy Big Bollocks, basically. Not sure if I'm allowed to say it on your podcast, but I just have.
Yeah, you said you can swear as much as you want.
Okay, you'll cut it out afterwards.
No.
No,
sorry, just to prove a point here, what's this? Fuck. And I won't cut that out. You hear that in the podcast?
I didn't know you knew that word.
Yeah. But we'll not cut that out. We'll put that in. You can do whatever. I mean, it probably sets a bad precedent because after this, you'll be doing proper interviews and then you'll think you're on this and you'll, I don't know, say wanker on Radio 4 or something. But yeah, you can swear as much as you want. Sorry to interrupt.
My dad, believe it or not, my dad was a legend about the book. He read every single word of it. He went through it. My dad is was a teacher. He knows grammar. He knows all that he knows how to write a sentence basically in a way that I just don't. And his biggest problem with the book was not that I kind of bared my soul and possibly put a few things into the public domain that were difficult for the government or whatever, about Boris Johnson literally hiding from Ian Duncan Smith, for example. But it was the fact that the F word was in it 6 times. And my dad was like, that's not okay.
He wanted more.
So. Brilliant. I can't remember what your question was. How did I get into journalism? Yeah. So as I was one of those children, I was all of 11 years old, literally 11 years old. And I wrote off to the editor of my local paper, the Portadown Times, a really nice guy called Davy Armstrong, and basically said, well, I just don't think you're serving the young people in the area with this newspaper. And I really think more could be done for the young people in the area. I mean, the arrogance of it at 11 years old. So Davey calls me into his office and he's like, right, mate, you're going to change it. So you're going to write me an article. So literally had my first article published about Rich Hill, my village in County Armagh, and, what could be done to improve it and all that kind of stuff. Age 12. And I just kind of got the bug, kept going, went to university, did student journalism there, did lot of people are very nice to me. That's the thing actually in journalism. You know, people think journalists are all nasty people. They're really, really not. There's some really good people like David Blevins, actually, like a woman called Yvette Shapiro, who've been kind of my mentors through, you know, my journalistic career, basically. Like, I rarely made a decision without asking them. But no, I mean, yeah, Nolan was kind of, to be honest, a bit of a low point. It just wasn't that fun, really. But the rest of it, I mean, I had some brilliant opportunities, worked on Newsnight, worked in Question Time, worked in America, BBC Washington, all that kind of caper. And then, I mean, you know, if you think Nolan's a big personality, the last 2 years of my journalistic career, I worked with Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain. So, yeah, I mean, he's actually, believe it or not, he sent me a really nice message. Part of my book was in the Mail on Sunday, like they do, you know, the little extracts and stuff. And he actually sent me a DM on Twitter saying, you know, well done, that made me laugh, you know, good luck with the book kind of thing, which I thought was really nice, actually, especially as there's a fairly substantial part of the book where I slag him off. Mainly because he spent 4.5 minutes on national television slagging me off when we wouldn't give him an interview with one of my bosses. Some people, I'm sure people remember, well, I'm sure some people remember James Brokenshire, who was the Northern Ireland secretary. I worked for him, and then I worked for him again when he was the housing secretary. He had cancer in the middle, and then he sort of came back, and I worked for him a second time. And James was just like, I just don't really want to do Piers Morgan. And I was like, okay, well, fair enough. And sent them a mildly snotty email saying, you know, the Ofcom code, all these kind of regulations say that you've got to do an impartial interview, and we can't really rely on Piers to do that, so we're not going to do it. And then he read out the email on air, and then just kind of did like funny voices with like, oh, imagine going to your mum saying like, oh, I'm a SPAD, oh, what's a SPAD? It is, I mean, the clip is worth watching. It's
even you appreciated it.
Yeah, I mean, Piers Morgan was slagging off my mother, essentially. It was essentially your mum on Good Morning Britain at 6:15 in the morning. So thankfully no one was watching. But yeah, it was kind of weird.
The book is about special advisors, and I don't think either I hadn't heard of special advisors until RHI personally, or I mean, have special advisors always been around politics, or is this just a new term that's being used? It feels to me like who doesn't know a lot about politics just came out of nowhere.
Well, I think it just shows that, you know, they're in the shadows for such a degree. I mean, basically, prime ministers have always, and different cabinet ministers have always had, you know, friends, associates, kind of political people. So you've got the civil service, and they're all, you know, impartial or should be impartial people who can work for any government, you know, whether it's Labour, Conservative, Sinn Féin, DUP, whatever, in Northern Ireland's case. And then you've got the ministers themselves, and then you've got their kind of sidekicks, basically. So Harold Wilson set it up formally in 1964. So it's been around for, 56 years now. And for a lot of the time, there weren't that many of them. Now there are probably about 110, which is, I think, probably the largest number ever. And you're a bag carrier, but you're also a friend, advisor. I did this sort of, I mean, speaking of doing the Today program, as we were a bit earlier, I did the Today program last week, which is kind of like, oh my word, it's the Today program in Radio 4. But also I did talk radio on Saturday with this guy who was literally, you know, a lot of these talk radio things are now in vision. So I was sitting on my computer like this, and he was literally like holding up a review of the book and reading out stuff from the review. And I'm not sure his research was particularly extensive, but he was like, yeah, so like, who are these people, and you know what they do, and all this kind of stuff, and why do we need them? It's so bloody expensive, etc. And you're like,
Frank
obviously,
Frank
Butcher, he lived in Belfast for many years, but picked up the accent. But yeah, and then I sort of said, right, you know, you've gone from the Today program, was all, oh yes, very nice, blah 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 blah, politics, and then you're on the talk radio with this guy who just lovely guy, I'm sure, but as I say, research not that extensive. And I just said to him, look, right, so the thing with a SPAD is, you know, when you've had a row with your wife and all your mates are saying, nah, you're in the right, don't apologise, you know, you're the great guy. And then you go to the pub with your mate, your best mate, and your best mate's sitting with a pint and says, gotta apologise.
Yeah, I get you.
That's what a SPAD does. You're the kind of guy who says, everybody else is telling you you're in the right, and I'm actually so good a friend of yours, and I know your mind so well that I'm the one who's giving you the tough love and actually saying, can't do this. Go and apologize to your wife.
So then that explains it perfectly to me. What is it that causes this moment where it feels like there are so many more special advisors, and all of a sudden the special advisors nearly as well as the politicians? Because surely the job is to kind of, as you say, be in the shadows, be in the background. Is it that some of these special advisors wanted a little bit of limelight, or how come that happened?
That's part of it. Definitely. It's also, everybody in politics has an agenda. And, the Dominic Cummings people, actually, you can go back to kind of Alistair Campbell, who worked for Tony Blair, and a few other people in the middle who kind of became kind of too big for the role, basically. And what you've got to realize is that, it's not about you, it's about your boss, and it's not about your agenda, it's about what they want. The cliche is, ministers decide, advisors advise, and ministers decide. And once you lose that once you think, actually, I'm really powerful and I'm the person running the show here, you've got to be really, really careful. And the good thing was, I worked for 4 different cabinet ministers and had different relationships with all of them, all pretty positive relationships. But James was really good at basically making a decision, sticking to it, and your kind of power kind of flowed from him in a way. So, or influence really. And also we had just a really good personal relationship. And there's a guy in the Irish News, their political correspondent, a guy called John Manley, who once wrote that James Brokenshire has the personality of a motorway services station car park, which was
harsh, but an enjoyable analogy.
Enjoyable to most people, not that enjoyable to like me, who like would take a bullet for James, basically. But yeah, you do get that kind of thing. What kind of frustrates me is that behind the scenes, like, James just has the bounce. He is like a really funny, interesting, nice guy. And because he had to go out and say, well, Sinn Féin and the DP, and we have these talks and because he had to be Captain Serious in lots of interviews, you don't kind of get the other side of him, basically, in a way that you probably did with Julian Smith, actually, who was quite good at kind of like, oh yeah, I'll go out and make all the journalists a cup of tea and all that kind of stuff, which actually we should have done more of. But there we go.
I was going to say, is it difficult when a politician personally, when you have a close relationship, that side of them, but clearly the people don't, and you're maybe reading stuff on maybe even your own personal Facebook of people putting up opinions, and is it difficult not to constantly like reply to those and be like, you don't know him, that kind of like that must be a lot of it. You mentioned Theresa May at the start of this, that she was one of your political heroes, and me hearing
probably not an opinion that most people watching this podcast have of Theresa May, I would venture.
No, definitely not. But what I mean is, do you have a lot? There must be so much. It must be hard not to be defensive all the time, because
of course,
you know more about politics than 99% of people. Definitely a lot more about politics than me. But if you know a different side, it's almost like you can't have so Theresa May. It's almost like we're in this day and age where you can't have a positive, like, it's not allowed to have a positive opinion of Theresa May. Like, I don't know what you know about Theresa May. I only know what I see in the press and what I see on social media.
Well, read the book, Shane. But I think it's.
Is it paperback? Because if it's hard, but that's a reason I haven't read it yet. I don't like hardback.
We can send you a review copy if you're very.
Yeah, please do.
But no, I think James has and Mrs. May have like the hide of a rhino. Basically, they can just, doesn't matter what people say about them, they just get on with it. I certainly start had an incredibly thin skin, and I was like, who are these bastards who are writing this stuff about my guy? And you can't do that. You've just got to realize that you got to toughen up a bit and realize that people will always have their opinions. And it's kind of, I remember actually there's a I can say this now, I couldn't say this previously. There's a columnist for the Irish News called Brian Feeney, and literally, like, he just, every Secretary of State, he calls him the proconsul, this kind of like person who descends from on high and mucks everybody's life up. And in Roman times, and I basically once wrote a kind of spoof column of Brian Feeney's, and I was like, just whoever was the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, like, they just couldn't be a good person. Like, it was impossible in Brian Feeney's mind. And I was like, Brian Feeney's latest column, Mother Teresa has been appointed Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. The questions we have to ask, is she really a mother? And secondly, she seems to hang around a lot of people who then die. So, I think we should ask questions about whether she's really all that people say she is. That's the kind of attitude that Brian Feeney has.
From what you're saying there, do you end up is it a job that by its nature gets you into a lot of beefs? Does it get you into a lot of back and forth with people? And I mean, I would say special advisors have a lot of, I wouldn't say enemies, but surely there becomes a long list of people who, as you say, if someone criticizes you're a politician, you're a friend, then you must get
your
into
job
a
is
lot of
your job is to have an opinion. And my job as a journalist for 10 years was to have no opinion. Was to say, this person said this person said this, da da da. And that's I think what I did, hopefully successfully for 10 years. But your job as a special advisor is to have an opinion. And unsurprisingly, I have a load of friends who hate the Tories, think we're all dreadful people who hate poor people, and that's not my experience at all of the Conservative Party.
I mean, when I look at my my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, there is so much anti-Tory stuff, especially around Marcus Rashford's campaign. If you were advising Boris Johnson right now, if you were advising the top of the Tory party, you think they're doing anything wrong there? You think they're coming across in a bad way? You think they've made any mistakes in their handling of it? Because it definitely seems like that.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Rashford was a complete screw up, massive screw up from start to finish. The irony of all of that is that in politics you deal with these huge amounts of money, not in your salary, but you're dealing with one of my first days at the Ministry of Housing, for example. I was at like, okay, you've got half an hour to decide whether we're doing this £28 million thing, and you're just like, that is so much taxpayers' money. Like, I need more time. I can't just make a decision. And secondly, the Marcus Rashford stuff, what he was asking for was £20 million, which in the scheme of the hundreds of billions, trillions of pounds of government money is nothing. And you sort of say, well, look, it's a bit more complicated than just giving kids free school meals. It was not that more complicated. And yeah, like coronavirus have been all sorts of problems. There are lots of problems with Brexit, obviously. They're going to be more as time goes on. What things actually look like on the 1st of January is a bit of a mystery. So yeah, I mean, every government all the time, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whatever, always has huge problems. And you've got to, a lot of it is just damage control. A lot of it is just saying, there's the kind of too difficult box, which a lot of people sort of push things off in the long grass quite a lot. And your job as a special advisor is to say, we need to take it out of the too difficult box and actually find a way through it, which will mean that we can keep the party on board, keep our MPs still voting for us, which has been a problem for Boris recently. And also the public, in 2024, are people going to vote for Boris Johnson or not? Which is, I hope they do, but it's a big question.
I think it seems to me like it's very hard for politicians and for parties to admit that they got things wrong, to come out and say, like, listen, we've done this wrong, we're going to change up our attitude to this, because if you look like you have conceded in any way or you admit, it's obviously going to be used against you so much by the opposition. So is that why, it like you say, it looks very simple for the Tory government now to change their stance, to sort of go back, maybe apologise, maybe say, like, look, we handled this wrong, sit down with someone like Marcus Rashford.
Yeah.
But is that at times what would prevent that? Is it the saving face kind of amongst their own
definitely that's part of it. And look, people have egos, and that is part of it. And also, you don't want to do it too much. I mean, occasionally a U-turn, for example, can actually be a sign of strength, where you're saying, yeah, do you know what, I got it wrong, hold my hands up, everything's, Marcus Rashford, great guy, really good campaigner, knows the stuff because he's lived it. The free school meals is just really straightforward campaign. He's also, there are a lot of these campaigners who are really, especially celebrities, who are really churlish and really kind of not very sure, whereas Marcus Rashford, despite the fact he's like 22 or something, is incredibly mature and just very polite and just, this is these are the reasons why, rather than being this sort of hysterical kind of campaigner like, someone like Emma Thompson or whatever. But the problem is, a few U-turns is fine. The problem is when, the government did something like 11 or 12 in the last 6 months, and then Keir Starmer, the Labour Party, trundles in and says, this is chaos, this is badly managed, we can't trust you to run the country, we do a better job, and you need to be... There's a fine line, really. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. I think one of the most powerful things you can say as a human being is, I'm sorry, I got it wrong, which I've just done to a friend this morning about something, actually. In politics, it's difficult to say too much, especially when you have Twitter, the media, all the rest piling in and saying, U-turn after U-turn, Politics is really difficult. Running a company is a really, really tricky thing. And I was a sort of bit part player for 3.5 years. But it was amazing, and I loved it, and it was an incredible privilege. But at the same time, it was the toughest job I've ever done, or probably will ever do.
Did you apologise this morning to Glenn Ross for keeping him waiting an hour and a half in cold?
It actually was Glenn Ross. It was. On my other friend Glenn Gary. So Glenn Gary and Glenn Ross. I like
what you've done there. I like what you've done there a lot. Whenever you were working with James Brokenshire, was there any controversial issue? Was there any big news event in Northern Irish politics and local politics that you would have been advising him on and you were really there for? What's the one that really stands out to you?
Probably just the sort of ongoing collapse of Stormont, Martin McGuinness dying, trying to getting the show back on the road. And as I say in the book, there are all these very, very long talks processes, sometimes over weekends. I was flying between London and Belfast. I flew between London and Belfast, mostly between London and Belfast, sometimes Brussels and Dublin, I think 85 times in 2017. So not the best carbon footprint, but the good news is that one of the Aer Lingus stewardesses is now my Facebook friend. So
excellent. Were you getting any perks there? Was there any, when the trolley came along, were any peanuts falling off?
It's interesting you mentioned this. She did once give me a free cup of tea and a Kit Kat. So, and actually, I'm quite tall and occasionally get upgraded to the old exit row.
I imagine there's so many people, especially special advisors, who think, there are some obviously that want the limelight, some that step forward, but the people that don't, they're probably the ones that are nervous because they don't want people to be discussing special advisors. And did you have much access to Dominic Cummings? Is he someone that you've had many interactions with?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, one of the main interaction I had was probably there was a terrorist attack in a place called Streatham in southeast London.
Yep.
For this guy just being released from prison, and my job at that time was with Ministry of Justice, worked for the Justice Secretary, and we were talking about tenanting, and I was literally in the cabinet room with Dominic, Boris Johnson, Home Secretary, Justice Secretary, and got the crystal glasses with the ER kind of royal insignia, drinking a glass of water, talking about how to deal with this terrorist attack, and it was a wee bit surreal, to be honest. Bit random. Felt a slight imposter, but but no. Every week he had these meetings every Friday at 6:00, which is obviously the time you want to have a work meeting, and no interest in heading off for a pint or anything. And we also had a meeting one Monday morning at 7:55 a.m. where. And we just started, and Dominic had just come in, and he said, if you leak from government, you will be marched from your desk by the head of security in your department. Your phone will be taken off you. Your passport will be taken off you. You have no rights. And I sort of thought, I got up at 6:30 this morning to come to this meeting. I'm working 16, 18 hours a day in this job. Possibly a wee bit more carrot, a little less stick there, Dominic, maybe?
Yeah. Do you think do you think special advisors should have special advisors? Do you think someone should have been said to him, in the last few months, listen, I don't know if this is a good move. When he's listen, if he had a special advisor, when he said he was having eyesight problems, his special advisor could have been Specsavers. We can get you down there in 15 minutes, as opposed to him being I think the best option here is a very, very long drive. I mean, if he had an advisor, that wouldn't have happened.
I mean, it's a fair point. The question is, how long do you keep going? You know, what if this is there like a special advice? It's like, you know, when you watch a film, it's like the third assistant director or whatever. It's like, is there a special advisor to the special advisor? And I do. I mean, we used to say SPAD rather than special advisor, and one of my mates actually, I call her the SPAD, basically, because she keeps me on straight and narrow and basically says, like, mate, you're being an idiot, you know, sort of out. And you know, sometimes in brutal terms, and that's what's needed sometimes.
What will I mean, has the book, do you think, will it have changed the way like you're viewed in some of those circles? Do you think if you were...
Oh yeah, I'm sure it has. But the thing is that, you know, I could have written the 10 out of 10 book. You know, I could have written the book that really burned all my bridges. I would have been a different book if it was 66 rather than 36. But to be honest, it's full of just silly stories. You know, essentially, if you're speaking of 10 out of 10, you know, if in terms of humor and being funny, like, you're obviously a 10, and I'm hopefully a 2 or a 3. And there's some, I mean, one of my favorite stories in the whole book, which you may or may not find funny, but one of my favorite stories was James, speaking of glasses, actually, speaking of eyesight, James Brokenshire has these quite kind of geeky glasses, like the rimless glasses.
Yep.
And like from day one, I was like, mate, you got to change glasses.
Get a rim.
And this has been like an ongoing beef, literally for 4 years, between me and James and his wife, Kathy. But anyway, we're chatting. That's important to what I'm about to say, which is that we talk about TV all the time on Netflix and whatever. James just knows everything about, like, he has teenage kids, so he watches the X Factor and, you know, Strictly and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, "Oh, you got to watch Designated Survivor. Designated Survivor is brilliant. Like, the acting is pure oak furniture land, but like, it's brilliant. It's really, really good." And I watched the first few episodes, and it was like, have you watching Kiefer Sutherland? If you don't know, Kiefer Sutherland is like this kind of slightly geeky housing guy who then, you know, everybody dies, he's a designated survivor, and he becomes the president. And I was like, James, what was it about the housing guy with the geekiness who became leader of the free world that like appealed to you about the series? What was the element there?
Did Kiefer Sutherland's character have rims though?
He had geeky glasses, not rimless glasses, but definitely
still same ballpark.
More Jack Duckworth, but he was told, like, take the glasses off. So yeah, to look more presidential. And actually, believe it or not, I mean, I'm so obsessed about this. I was actually at a wedding with these I was sitting beside these people who are like quite high-end opticians, like they work on Fleet Street in London, and they do glasses for like costing like $3,500 basically for these judges and stuff. And I was literally like, whip out the phone, Google image search James Brokenshire, what glasses should he have to these people? Just getting the free advice over the Volavots, you know?
Yep. I want to ask you about your... Do you touch on like Northern Irish politics at all in the book, or is this
a wee bit?
like...
A wee bit, yeah, a wee bit. There's one particularly disobliging story about Arlene Foster in there.
I'm surprised. I don't think... I mean, I'm racking my brain. I don't think, you know, the DUP have done anything that you could even do a story on. I mean, the thing about local politics is fairly uneventful, and the DUP especially, I just don't see any controversies there. I think they're pretty safe.
You see, people sometimes come to me for political analysis, but I think they should come to you, Shane.
Correct.
You've got your finger on the pulse.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to apply the sort of slogan of "boys will be boys" when it comes to local politics. You know, RHI. Okay, what's the big deal? You know, collapse of power sharing. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think
we've all done it.
Yeah,
who amongst us can honestly say that we haven't, you know, got a big boiler heating a hen house with no hens on it? You know, who amongst us?
And Ian Paisley Jr. has gone to, I don't know, Barbados or Mauritius or what, and what any of us would do that. And why are we all, like, when we read that, being like, oh, he should be out of office?
Just jealousy.
Yeah,
just jealousy.
He's having time of his life. I prefer my politicians have more vitamin D. You know what I mean? Because they're going to be better at their jobs. I don't know.
Someone I know actually bumped into Ian Paisley and had the balls to say to him, like, after one of those stories, he was like, "Ian, lovely to see you on one of your rare visits to the UK."
he loves it, and he's that like he loves it so much that even I am like, fair enough. Part of me
Well,
is like,
if you're talking
fair
about
enough.
people, as we were talking about earlier, people in politics who just don't care what people think of them, like who just have this hide of a rhino kind
Yeah.
of, I'm just going to get on with my life, and this is the way things are. You know, you got to admire it in a way.
I think so. You obviously like I don't agree with it. Obviously, I'm like, okay, there's so many reasons why that's bad. But part of me will always be like, you know what? In a way, it's a bit of fun. It's funny. Like it's so bad, but it's funny that he's done that. Like some political things that happen here, like a little bit of controversy. Part of me's like, there's something like the Sinn Féin, the money there, the like 30 grand in the account, and someone's like, "Flip, I didn't know it was." To me, like that's funny, but then again, I'm probably paying for that in my taxes, or there's going to be some knock on
But
for
at the
that.
same time, your taxes are probably worth it to just,
Oh yeah, they'll cover it.
just have
They'll
that
cover it.
story. You're just like, well, the money was just resting in my account.
Yeah, I mean, what is the
Didn't
view?
notice it.
What is the view in London of politics in Northern Ireland? Do they think it is comical? Do they think we're maybe not backward, but do they maybe these things happen? Maybe the things we think are massive in politics that happen locally. Do they make are they a blip on the radar over there? Like, do people pick up on it?
Pretty much. I mean, I don't think people have really got over the kind of, with the Belfast Agreement, obviously, the world was watching us, quite
Yeah.
literally. I remember actually with Drumcree, was in Canada on a cross community choir chair. Do you know what we were called?
No, but I'm very keen to know.
People in Harmony.
Hmm. Mm-mm. I'm sad
Literally,
I missed.
literally kids,
I'm sad I didn't catch the
literally,
performance.
literally kids from the Protestant side and the Catholic side in Portadown, and we were people in harmony. Oh yeah, baby. So
Do,
anyway,
do,
we're in Canada on this choir tour, and I was staying with these people in Montreal.
mm-hmm.
A guy called Jacques Dubuc, who I promise you had like a cigar coming from his mouth every morning as he made his French toast, and he ran a strip club.
Sure.
It was amazing. Possibly wouldn't be allowed now, but anyway. And I was sitting in their living room and literally watching CNN, and Drumcree was on, and this guy was like, it was pure kind of like, Anchorman. This guy was born to have salon quality hair and read the news,
Yeah.
and there he was in Portadown going, I'm in the city of Portadown, where Protestants and Catholic, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. But that was the case in the 90s. It's absolutely not the case anymore. And actually, talking to Blevins, this David Blevins who you had on before, my hero, absolute legend, known him since he was 13. We have this thing, which is in the book as well, called Blevins Law, which is basically never underestimate how little English people know about Northern Ireland. So at one stage, David actually had to ring up Sky in London and say, that guy who's like this very highly paid correspondent, he probably shouldn't refer to Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams as on air as Sinn Féin's big guns.
Yeah, I mean, he told us about that, and when you hear that now, you probably like if someone were to tell me they used to call them the big, you wouldn't believe it. And that sounds like something that's made up. I'd love to know, did the cross community choir ever like bring the best of both worlds together and remix it up? Like, was there ever like a, come out you black and tans mixed with a sash? Like, was there anything, or was it?
I feel that was an opportunity missed.
So do I.
To be honest, I mean, I think Calvin Harris should have got in there and just slammed a few tracks down, basically. But no, we sang a thing called St. Patrick's Prayer, which was strength of God surrounding me, all that kind of caper. It was written by a priest. So yeah, it was brilliant because the best bit I think of being with Harmony Choir was like, well, two things really. One was the conversations where like you'd just be sitting on the bus, going to some performance or whatever, and you'd just be sitting around saying like, what is confession like? Like, is that not a bit weird, sitting in like a little cupboard talking to a priest through like a gauze, and like, is that a bit weird? And the second bit that was really good was, I mean, the bit I enjoyed best really was we'd done a big concert with James Galway. It was actually really, really nice. And, he's the man with the golden flute. I promise you, he brought like 2 golden flutes. And there were these young guys, like literally 15-year-olds, who were in the orchestra. And he like let them
play his flute.
Anyway, but no, we were on the way back to my school. So that was obviously on the Garbahi Road, that big chapel. And then I was walking back to Portdown College, the school I went to, and there were these people who were literally my schoolmates shouting, you know, I'll not use the word, but basically Catholic loving scum, we know where you live. And the thing was, I mean, they did. Like, they did, where I live. So that was...
Most people who say that are lying, but when they specifically know your postcode, you're like, bollocks, they know it.
Some of them had been to like my childhood birthdays and stuff, so they genuinely did know where I lived. So that was brilliant. Just going in there thinking we're trying to move things on a wee bit here by God forbid a few chats like with a few people from the other side, like in 1998, 1999, 2000, whatever. And there were people who thought, you know what, I could sit in and watch EastEnders. Actually, what I'm going to do is go out and shout abuse at my schoolmate.
To be fair, though, like during the summer with Drumcree and stuff, I know people could have stayed in, but I mean, Drumcree was during the summer, wasn't it? So if there is a case for like taking advantage of the longer nights, at the end of the day, you can look at the negativity of it, but then you can also say, there's a load of lads going to meet up here. Probably a few cans knocking about. It's a sunshine, it's a social gathering.
And not just the cans, Shane, the number of Presbyterian women who were involved. Think of the sandwiches. Think of the tray decks.
And listen, I don't need to be there to know that those sandwiches would have been cut into triangles.
You know it so well. You're like Elaine Page there, Barbara Dixon.
I don't get the reference, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
They're 2 singers who once sang a song called "I Know Him So Well." So just that's the difference between me being 36 and you being what? How old are you?
What are you guessing here?
I don't know. 29.
32. I like it.
Okay.
I want to ask 2 things. I want to ask how the book is going down. How's it being received? I know Waterstones are selling it, which is surely a really good sign for a book.
Yeah, Amazon have actually just asked for a reprint, which is very exciting. So we've got about 3,000 copies in. I mean, it's never going to be. I'm not David Williams. It's not going to be on number 1 on the bestseller list. But there's only a certain number of people who are going to want to read it. But it's quite funny. Max Hastings, who's this kind of like probably in his 70s, maybe his 80s, former editor of the Daily Telegraph, all this kind of stuff, wrote this review, and he was like, I think there's a serious book to be written about the Northern Ireland peace talks and about Brexit. This isn't it. And I was like, those books exist. I don't know about you, Max, but I would have been bored senseless reading a book like that, or indeed writing a book like that, which takes a lot longer. So no, it's funny stories. It's kind of harmless anecdotes. It's stuff about like the working pension secretary, one called Therese Coffey. Like, I was just sitting in work one day, and I got a text message from a friend of mine who'd been at the Brit Awards. So sometimes you do get to go to cool stuff. So she'd been invited to the Brit Awards. And Therese Coffey, I don't even know who she is, but she's the working pension secretary. And a friend of mine just sent me a text message saying, like, the image that will be burned into the pupils of my eyes, perhaps forever, is that of Therese Coffey attempting to twerk to Stormzy.
I mean,
it's stuff like that. It's not, historians are not going to look at this book in 50 years. They're not going to look at it in 5 years. It's not going to be cited in academic studies. It's just hopefully a relatively entertaining book that tells you about a job you didn't really know existed, but is actually quite important.
And I think that's the side of politics people are interested in. It's the side of politics where, it's not, like that guy who's calling for it to be a certain thing. You're showing the human side of these people, and it's not, like you say, a boring thing. It's enjoyable anecdotes, and I think that's what people are interested in, because we see these special advisors and as these shadowy figures that have no personalities or or anything like that, and actually you're offering a completely different argument, I'd say, in a lot of cases.
It's interesting. Well, thanks very much. And the other thing is that a mate of mine, a guy called Ryan, who's from Korean, read the book. You got to, when you're writing a book, it's a good idea to get people to read the manuscript beforehand to see, especially some people like got like political obsessives to read it, and also got like my mate who, is from Portadown and just doesn't really know that much about politics, but likes a bit of a gossip to read it. That was a good idea to get on everybody in between. So I got about 6 or 7 people to read it. My mate Ryan from Korean read it, and he was like, so I called James Brokenshire, like his nickname is Brokey, because obviously his name's quite long. And Ryan sent me a text message. It was like, Brokey comes out of the book better than God comes out of the Bible.
but the glass. I mean, it's just eyewear that was the only thing letting them down.
Listen, that's one of his few flaws. We all, no one's perfect. But it is quite funny, actually, when I worked for another guy, the Justice Secretary. I came back from a big, these political conferences, came back from a political conference, and been working with him for about 2 or 3 months. And my housemate said, we've got a good relationship with Robert. Like, it's professional. It's, you admire him. He gets on well with you. He trusts you. All this kind of stuff. Like, it's a healthy working relationship. And I said, oh, right. Was it not like that with James Brokenshire? And she went, nah, it was more sort of, it's more sort of disciple messiah, really.
Yeah, I mean, James Brokenshire, I know very little about. I remember he was the kind of secretary here, but that's funny that, like, it's just funny when you hear politicians being humanized almost. You just don't think of, like you say, the behind the scenes. And I'd say nearly every politician, I'm sure, behind the scenes is in a way good crack, likes a joke. I mean, I'd say there's more so than
well,
don't.
Listen, talk about sort of egos and kind of, people wanting to get ahead and, selling their own granny and all the rest of it. Like, that can be politics in the way that can be, comedy, teaching, whatever, all those professions. There are good people and bad people at all jobs. And the thing that kind of annoys me, and actually what I want people to take away from the book, is that yes, there are people who are absolutely will stab you in the front, kind of, sell their own granny to make progress, to become prime minister or cabinet. And those people definitely exist, no doubt about it. But the majority of people I met in politics from all sides, actually, and I'm not just talking about the Conservative Party, I'm talking about all parties, they're generally in it for the right reasons. They're generally decent people. And that's, I think we need to kind of give our politicians a bit of a break. Like, I was a journalist, as I said, for 10 years, and I was hard-bitten and cynical about politics. And then I kind of got to know it better from the inside, both as a journalist and then special advisor. And I realized that the vast majority of people could be, not everybody could be earning more money. A lot of people could be earning more money and it's not even about the money, it's about the easier life. Like, James rarely saw his kids when he was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Like, he was back and forward all the time, and early in the morning, late at night, and all this kind of stuff. And I remember Karen Bradley, actually, peace be upon her, who was in a meeting once with Sinn Féin, and it was like Saturday afternoon, and she was meant to be like watching her son play hockey or something in London, and she was stuck in this meeting with Sinn Féin, and she was just like, they were just being a bit difficult. And she said, my son is meant to be playing hockey, I'm meant to be watching it. I'm not here for a laugh. I'd much rather be with him, kind of thing. But there she was on Saturday afternoon, doing the job, basically. So yeah, we need to slightly give people a bit of a break, really.
What do you? Let me ask you this. I keep saying it's my last question. This is my last question. If you were advising the local government right now, totally hypothetically, the idea of this lockdown, this circuit breaker that we've had, and then this deadline that passed of, okay, bars and restaurants are going to be open. Then they're like, oh, we got the day wrong. I'm sorry, but we're extending it, and we got the day and the time wrong. How would you be advising our government right now on this? Because there is a massive feeling of horrific communication. The government seems more sort of, is fragmented a word? Does that mean everyone's like,
yeah, no, it does. No, it's right. I mean, I think the first bit of advice, and I think this really is born of, my 15 years of political experience, is buy a calendar. That would sort of probably be the first bit of advice. But no, more seriously, I think you've just got to be honest with people. You need to keep your arguments behind closed doors as much as possible. Because, when I was a journalist, I'm like, everything has to be transparent, and I want to know every single thing that happened, and I want to report this, and da-da-da. Not, I still have that kind of like nosiness, but actually what I learned was sometimes, you can have as many arguments as you want behind closed doors, but in public, you've got to have a united front. And I think, look, we have a very strange system in Northern Ireland of how we're governed in terms of this kind of mandatory coalition, but that's the way it is. That's what got us through Belfast Agreement and all the rest of it. And that's the way things are. But I remember actually Robin Swan. I like Robin very much, and I think he's really good health minister, despite the horrendous challenges of the last while, which obviously are much more serious for people going through coronavirus than any politician. But he was on the media yesterday. We're sitting here talking on Monday. He was on Sunday Politics and BBC yesterday, and we're like, are you considering your position? He's like, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic here. It's probably a good idea that I stick around, and also if I was considering my position, I probably wouldn't be telling the media. And I sort of thought, we appear to have a grown-up here. We appear to have a grown-up, We don't need to put it all on Twitter about how we hate each other. Why don't we just kind of have a little argument in private and try and get stuff done? So that's what I tried to do. And, wasn't always successful, wasn't always particularly brilliant at it. Made a lot of mistakes, of course I did. But, at the end of the day, I think our politicians just need to kind of slightly grow up a wee bit. And we actually have a quite immature democracy when you think about it. Like, if for 30 years your job was to say no, and this is rubbish and this is bad and everybody else is terrible, and then suddenly you've got to work with people, like that's a big shift. And I think it takes a bit more than 22 years actually to kind of move on as a democracy, really. So that's Jerry's final thought for you today.
Not Jerry Adams' final thought. You've been heavily influenced. You're in Adams' pocket.
That is it. It's often been said,
Adam's Pocket sounds like a game show that would have been on UTV in the early 90s. Peter, the book
presented by Julian Simmons.
I've always wanted to say this. The book is available everywhere. All good bookshops. And
do you know what?
Bad ones, I'm sure.
By a remarkable coincidence.
Oh, there it is. That's a great cover. It's a great cover.
Yeah, it is. I'm hoping people do judge this book by its cover.
Yeah,
because
great cover.
The guy who designed it was brilliant. What, sorry?
And they don't even need to read it. It's just get the cover, buy it, and just that's a coffee table cover.
You don't need to read it. Just buy it. Absolutely, just buy it. Yeah.
Or that's
it. That's all I want.
Just transfer you the money. That's all that matters.
Do you know what? It's interesting. I've actually got a minor cottage industry going, which is people who want a signed copy. So it's mainly friends and family. But if you send me a DM on Twitter at Peter Caldwell, I'll send you a signed copy. So I do it for exactly the same amount as it costs on Amazon, but you get it signed. I get them for a tenner. Amazon's selling them for 15 quid. The postage is £3.10. I've just bought a job lot of Jiffy bags. There's a clear £1 profit for that in me. So excellent. For me, so not just a pretty face. Not just a pretty face.
Excellent, Peter. I genuinely will read the book. I didn't want to say I'd read it before we did this. I will do that. And I will. I'm sure have more questions based on you over that. I'd love to have you on the podcast again at some point. Very, very, very interesting to chat to you. I really enjoyed that. And I think
very happy to do it again, Shane. You're I mean, I know, joking aside, and we've had a few jokes on this, but you're basically the best from Northern Ireland. You're a young guy, you're funny, you're not sectarian, you're not telling people jokes to make them feel.
Look, full disclosure.
Full disclosure.